What if success in real estate isn't hiding from you? What if the only thing standing between where you are and where you want to be was one decision you haven't made yet? What if I told you that the top producing agents in your market aren't smarter than you? What if they don't have better contacts, better leads, or better luck? What if the difference between a six-figure agent and a struggling agent is simply a different set of daily habits executed with a different level of intention? What if discipline, not talent, is the actual currency of this business? What if success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day? What if that truth applies to you right now in your market, with your database, with the tools you already have? What if success is simply waiting for you to become the person who can consistently earn it? What if your biggest problem isn't lack of talent? What if it's lack of repetition? What if you don't need a new strategy? What if you need more reps with the strategy you already have? What if you don't need a new CRM? What if you don't need a better website? What if you don't need to wait for interest rates to drop? What if the economy wasn't the problem? What if the broker, the brokerage, the zip code, the season, none of that was the problem? What if the market wasn't the problem? What if the reason you're not where you want to be has nothing to do with the market and everything to do with the story you keep telling yourself about the market? What if you've been using a slow market as permission to slow down? What if you've been using a competitive market as an excuse to feel defeated? What if the market has never been the point? Because the agent who works their relationships wins in every market. What if you're judging today's work by today's results when real estate almost never works that way? What if the seeds you're planting today aren't supposed to grow until next month? What if that's normal? What if you just need to start showing up like the agent you've already decided to become? What if you woke up tomorrow morning and instead of checking your phone before your feet hit the floor, you spent the first 30 minutes of your day planning your attack? What if that one habit, compounded over 90 days, changed the trajectory of your entire year? What if your next listing isn't 6 months away? What if it's 6 days away? What if the deal that changes your confidence is already sitting inside a conversation you haven't started? What if you are much closer than you think? What if the life you want is already inside the relationships you already have, and you just haven't engaged with them enough? What if you picked up the phone today and called 5 people who already know you, like you, and trust you, not to pitch them, just to check in? What if one of those calls turned into a listing appointment? What if that listing appointment turned into a closed transaction? What if that closed transaction became the referral that paid for your child's summer camp, your family vacation, or the investment account you've been meaning to open? What if the NAR data was trying to tell you something every single year when it shows that over 65% of buyers and sellers choose an agent they already knew or who were referred to? What if that statistic was the most powerful business strategy in the history of real estate and most agents completely ignore it? What if you've been waiting for confidence before you take action, when the truth is that confidence comes only after you take action? What if courage isn't the absence of fear in this business? What if courage is making that call anyway, hosting that open house anyway, asking for that referral anyway? What if the version of you that closes 30 transactions a year is just the version of you that stopped waiting and started doing? What if you stopped comparing your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20? What if every successful agent you know experienced the same frustration? What if social media has convinced you that everyone else is winning except you? What if the top producers you admire were once nervous making phone calls? What if they once sat at an open house when nobody walked through the door? What if they once wondered whether they should renew their license? What if confidence isn't something successful agents are born with? What if confidence is something that is built through action? What if certainty comes after movement instead of before it? What if nobody ever feels ready? What if the difference is that some people act anyway? What if successful agents aren't simply people who know more? What if they're people who quit less? What if today was the day you decided to stop thinking of yourself as someone who is trying to succeed in real estate and started thinking of yourself as a professional who has already decided to succeed? What if the most important decision you made in your business had nothing to do with your marketing strategy, your niche, or your farm area? What if the most important decision was simply deciding who you are? What if you are a trusted advisor, not just a salesperson? What if you are a community resource, not just a transaction facilitator? What if you are someone whose clients call not just when they're ready to buy or sell, but when they want to know if now is the right time, or if this is the right neighborhood, or if this makes sense for their family? What if being that kind of agent, that kind of person, was your real competitive advantage in a world full of transactional agents? What if you stopped asking, how do I get more business? What if you started asking, who do I need to become and who can I serve? What if discipline matters more than motivation? What if keeping promises to yourself is where confidence comes from? What if your future self is watching your decisions today? What if your future self is begging you not to quit? What if your future self is grateful you made one more call? What if your future self is thankful that you hosted one more open house? What if your future self is celebrating because you refuse to let one difficult month define you? What if that future version of you exists? What if one phone call could lead to one conversation? What if one conversation could lead to one appointment? What if one appointment could lead to one client? What if one client could lead to 10 referrals over the next 10 decades? The next decade? What if the biggest opportunities in your business arrive looking small? What if you started this week with one simple goal? Not a production goal, not a GCI target, but a relationship goal. What if that goal was to have 10 meaningful conversations this week with people who already know you? What if meaningful meant you actually listened, actually asked how their family was doing, actually remembered the thing they told you 6 months ago about their daughter's soccer team or their husband's new job? What if people don't need another salesperson? What if they need someone they can trust? What if your greatest advantage isn't technology? What if your greatest advantage is being human? What if your database isn't a list? What if it's a collection of relationships waiting to be strengthened? What if every conversation deposits trust into an account? What if enough deposits eventually create opportunity? What if this business has always been about people? What if it always will be? What if being remembered as the agent who actually cared was worth more than any meta ad you could ever run? What if the next person you text has already decided they need an agent, but hasn't decided which one? What if the next person you meet in an open house becomes your best advocate? What if you build a production plan, a real one, written down, reverse engineered from the income you want to earn, and then you worked that plan every single day without waiting for motivation to show up? What if you prospected every day, even on the days that it felt pointless? What if you followed up every day, even when you felt like you were bothering people? What if consistency is more powerful than intensity? What if a little bit every day beats a lot once in a while? What if your future income is hiding inside today's calendar? What if the answer isn't to work harder? What if the answer is to work more consistently? What if most agents stop prospecting right when consistency starts to matter? What if your willingness to continue is your greatest asset? What if the compounding effect of the small, consistent actions was already working in your favor? What if your business is actually growing, even though you can't see it yet? What if everything you've been through, every rejection, every lost deal, every listing that didn't go your way, every client who chose someone else, what if all of it was preparing you? What if failure in this business isn't the opposite of success? What if it's the tuition? What if the market needs more agents like you? Agents who choose relationship over transaction, service over commission, long game over quick win. What if one conversation, one call, one open house, one decision stands between where you are and where you've always wanted to be? What if the person watching this right now is closer than you think? What if you committed to the next 90 days? What if you focused only on today's actions? What if you measured conversations instead of commissions? What if you measured appointments instead of anxiety? What if you measured effort instead of emotions? What if you became the kind of agent who does the work whether you feel like it or not? What if your breakthrough is hidden inside the boring things that you've been avoiding? What if success is simply ordinary actions repeated long enough? What if you stopped waiting for motivation? What if you started acting before you felt ready? What if 90 days from now you're sitting in a completely different place? What if your pipeline is full? What if your confidence is high? What if your business finally feels predictable? What if this was the moment? What if this was the video you watched the week before everything changed? What if you look back on this day 2 years from now and you said, that was when I decided? What if you didn't wait anymore? What if the next chapter of your real estate career starts right now? What if you simply refuse to quit? What if that's all it takes? What if today was day one?